Hello and welcome to K-Wave 6 Radio. This is Kirk Spencer, your host. I just wanted to give you a quick message about today's podcast. This recording was done on Thursday, the 26th of March, and after the show was done, I gave my guest, Andrés, the opportunity to choose between an airing on Friday or today, Monday, the 30th of March. He opted for today, the 30th, because he has some information that he wanted to share, but in written form, which you'll find on our blog, dated the 30th of March. So, if you'd like to find out what he had to add to this program, but in written form, even if you're listening to the show later, just come back to our blog page, dated the 30th of March, for Andrés Ginestet, and you will be able to find that information there. We hope you enjoy the show. Take care and be well. Welcome to K-Wave 6 Radio, your show for all things positive. Hello and welcome to K-Wave 6 Radio. This is Kirk Spencer, your host, as always. And today, for this podcast, I have Andrés Ginestet back from Germany, who is, if you haven't been listening to our previous shows, he is an unpaid expert at NATO, and his title is Senior Expert on Systems Theory of Violence. Now, we've been talking and doing a lot of shows recently. The reason why he's on podcast, because just recently we had him on just last week. If you're listening on the last week of March, we just had him on last week doing a live show, which now you can find on either on Blog Talk Radio, on our archives there, or in YouTube on our archives it's under podcast interviews. We've been talking a lot about this, and the reason why I keep bringing Andrés back is because he is very passionate about wanting to have this world that we live on, and it was created for us, if you will, at least by my standards, as a paradise, but we've allowed it to become our prison because we are not taking charge of it and making it what I would assume most of us would want it to be, which is a peaceful, beautiful place for us, and as Andrés says, even for his children and our children as they grow older. In other words, we want to pass on a legacy of beauty, not of one of what we see pretty much every day in the news. Now, today our topics basically are going to be three in an essence. We're going to start with the German flight that crashed into the Alps just recently. I think it was last week. Number two, we're going to talk about NATO in the U.S., violence, and I'm going to let Andrés get into that one later. And then we're going to talk about a conversation that he has had with a Catholic priest. That's going to be the end of the show. So without any further ado, welcome back, Andrés.
Welcome all. I would like to say hello first to all our listeners so that they know that I'm really enjoying to be allowed to explain certain issues, and so that we can get and come to a common understanding of how paradise and how the world described by US, Western and Eastern media is as a difference. I'm really happy to be here with you again, Kirk. I'm very thankful for the fact that you invite me to these conversations so that we can describe to our audience a little bit of how we could in fact change reality step by step. So you wanted me to talk today about the German flight crash, which was a very normal plane. It was a plane that was full of tourists. There was a group of 16 German students from a normal high school with two of the teachers, which all came from one city, the city of Haltern in Germany. It was a regular flight from Barcelona to Düsseldorf, and among the passengers were no special people, just two singers, opera singers who just came back from one opera singing in Barcelona at El Teatre del Liceu. So it was a flight which was a completely normal flight, a routine flight, and there was absolutely no speculative reason, no political target, nothing that could reasonably explain a political background for this suicidal behavior of the pilot. Mm-hmm. But as a matter of fact, we have a problem, which is that we have a plane which has 150 passengers on board. We have a co-pilot, we have a pilot, we have a security system, and then something goes wrong and something happens. I would like to know, what would be your question now? What is it that you would like to have explained?
Well, actually, I have two questions. Now, we spoke about this a little bit before, so before we got on to the show today, and just to verify or clarify, if you will, someone that I know had posted something about this flight, the crash, had something to do with the magnetics of the Hadron Collider over between the French and Switzerland or Swiss border. Mm-hmm. And supposedly this magnet was shorted out around that time, may have affected the flight. So you're saying that is basically, in American English, hogwash.
Yeah, hogwash, that's what I would confirm. It's very clear. We just had a press conference. This press conference was at 2 p.m. European Standard Time, so Paris time. And at this press conference, it was very clearly declared that the pilot was a suicidal pilot. It was a pilot age 28. What is not known yet is why he decided to commit suicide, but it was his decision. He was perfectly alive during the entire descent of the plane. The plane took 8 minutes to clash against the Alps, against the mountains. Mm-hmm. And it was a slow flight. He just kept the speed up and just flew down, very simply. So he didn't move anything at the plane, no strange movements, nothing, not to drive the passengers into panic. Mm-hmm. He just flew them into heaven. That's what I would say.
Yeah. All right. The other question I have now is not unusual for a pilot to walk out of the cockpit and check something or to do public relations with the passengers on a plane. But mm-hmm. Is there any reason? Is it known why the pilot stepped out of the cockpit?
I think he just wanted to go to the toilet, very simply. That's all. Uh-huh. He needed to go to the toilet and went out. And something in the protocol was not done well, because when the pilot goes out, another crew member should go in. But they just didn't do it. It just happened that there was no other crew member that went into the cockpit. If another crew member had gone into the cockpit, the co-pilot would not have been able to crash the plane.
Okay, let's get back to talking about this co-pilot. You said 28 years old, and you're saying that he was also, or his family had migrated to Germany. Is that correct?
Well, no. What I said is that, we have a strong migration all over the planet.
Yeah.
I said that, suicidal behavior is linked to epigenetic damages. Yeah. We know it from all the research that has been done from year 2008 on, we know that when people commit suicide, and this is a suicide, but it's at the same time, it's not a passionate crime because the co-pilot was very calm. So the voice recorder tells that his breathing was calm. So he was in tune, he was fine. He was just flying calmly the plane to crash it against the mountains. So if he was so calm, then I must say that he was in peace with himself and knew exactly what he was doing. So on the rational level, I understand he had absolutely no doubts about what he was going to do. Then this would confirm, in my understanding, that he had had either himself a violence experience in childhood, or that he had bad epigenetics, which means that he had an epigenetic inheritance, which then would mean that there is some trauma either at the experienced by the parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, or even one or two generations further. And due to the fact that we have a lot of migration that comes from traumatized zones, so from zones like Iraq, like Syria, like Afghanistan, it could be easily that we have, or any Eastern country, which like Russia in the 1990s, and other countries which have had very high levels of trauma. So it could be that there is a migration background, and it doesn't need to be that he had some violence experience himself, but it could very easily be. So sexual abuse in childhood could perfectly be a cause for this kind of behavior, because this has been analyzed and proven. There is a very clear correlation between epigenetic damages and suicidal behavior and sexual abuse. I mean, this really has been extremely thoroughly researched. There is 100% security on that. We know that there is a bias that can be proven just by blood sampling. So we just need a blood sample, and we can make the analysis and see how epigenetics of a person looks. And this correlation has been proven in year 2008.
All right, let me ask you this, because we were talking about this a little bit in our last show from last week. Mm-hmm. And I know that this flight has not been fully investigated yet, and they're still looking for all the pieces and everything from the flight. That much I know. Now, we were talking about in Germany, mm-hmm. After World War II, how Russians moved into the area, and I guess their own way of doing retribution, the majority of them raped the German women. Mm-hmm. And, of course, not every woman would have gotten an abortion. So could this have been, and I use the word could on purpose, could this have been an effect from your epigenetic standpoint of what would be the results of such actions from back that far?
Could be, yes, but then you need some circumstances which make the chances for it to happen higher, which means that, for example, the educational process, the growing up process, must be structured in an abuse context, which means that not only have the inheritance of the pattern, because this would be a third generation case in this case. Third generation means on the chemical level, on the epigenetic level, that we have, first generation damage is 100%, second generation damage is 50%, third generation damage is 25%. So 25% means that we have still sufficient biological material to cause this kind of behavioral disorder, but 25% can easily be compensated by the social surrounding of the person. So in this case, it could perfectly have been that, for example, this was a third generation epigenetic damage linked to sick social patterns, so behavioral patterns that are derived, an example, from sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm. How would that tie in, say, if this pilot, if his, let's just say his sexual partner, because at 28 years old, his chances are he had a sexual partner. Mm-hmm. How would that tie in if he had a problem, and we'll just leave it at problem, with his significant other?
It's very simple. I mean, this is part of our daily experience. It's completely normal. In our societies, these epigenetic damages have not been identified by citizens. Mm-hmm. These epigenetic damages are being identified by researchers, by sociologists, by molecular biologists, mm-hmm. by chemists. So, I mean, it's a very special group of people that is dealing with the knowledge and that is working on these issues. And this is just very little, I mean, this is a very small percentage of human population, which means that epigenetics is not a subject that is known by the big public, mm-hmm. And it's not like people in the street know what this is about and what it means. And that's the problem. We have a situation in which violence and the epigenetic damage recording this violence is completely acceptable and normal. People live with it, mm-hmm. because they don't know other ways. If they knew other ways, it would be completely different. And this is why we're making the radio program and this show. Mm. It's because we want to explain that there is a difference between knowing and not knowing.
Yeah. Okay, what I was getting at here is that using epigenetics, and I'm using the thought of a relationship issue, okay, as the key, the starter, or the match, if you will, because you were saying if something were to push him, I'm going to use my own language here, something to push something that made him just go, as we were talking about before, he was just completely dumb and just decided, yes, this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it. There's no second thoughts. I'm trying to frighten anybody. I just want to die. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. The other thing could also be, we are just talking about one possible factor, so it's a hypothesis, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I would like to say here, because we have to add hypothesis, is that there are obviously many causes mm-hmm. for suicidal behavior. Yeah, it could be a biological problem that is issued by functions which have nothing to do with an experience of violence. It could be a simple deformation. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens. Mm-hmm. Then it could be something which is simply tied to a cultural bias. It could be a Japanese pilot that inherits some traditions from a samurai grandfather and then decides to commit harakiri. That's one possibility. The other is obviously that it could be somebody with a Middle East background or religious background. So right at the moment, we do not have any certainty about what is the cause for the suicidal behavior. And this is why I say that it is necessary to make a very thorough investigation, a research upon the biography of this 28-year-old man to see what caused the suicidal behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I understand where you're coming from. I was just looking for that match point where what could be what took him over the edge, just to go, had enough, I'm ending it right here, right now. Don't even want to go home to deal with the situation. That's all I was asking.
Well, it could, for example, be, just hypothesis, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If he was abused as a child, it could be that he's seen in one of the passengers a profile that reminded him so strongly of the sexual abuse moment that his brain simply switches off.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm getting at, yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is very simple, but this can be anything. It can be a smell, it can be a sound, it can be a vision that he has. You never know. It's something that clearly makes his brain decide, okay, no, I'm going to crash the plane.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and he's done it in a very cold-blooded fashion because, his pilot was outside the door, banging at the door, asking to be allowed in and whatever. So he was really determined because he took a very patient path, it's like the descent went for 8 minutes and the passengers apparently didn't notice anything until just shortly before the crash.
Yeah. Just a slow nosedive into the mountainside. Yeah. I know, I don't want to go, well, okay. I was just going to say, yeah, it takes a while for a plane to descend, unless, of course, it's, even if a wing has been shot off, it would still be a slow, well, not as fast as people think it would be. It's not quite like the movies. Example is, several years ago, I wanted to ride on a glider. So I got into a glider plane, we were towed up, and we went up about to, I think it's around just under 15,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And the guy had a radio in the glider, and he got a message, and they said, well, when do you think you'd be back down? And he said 15 minutes. And it took him 15 minutes to go down just under 15,000 feet back down to ground level.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's, 8 minutes is, it's not a long time, but it's not as short as you might think. So,
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Anyhow, shall we move on to our second topic?
Okay, yes,
right.
Okay.
NATO homogeneity and U.S. violence gearing up, and the Minister of the Interior.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Regarding NATO, NATO is a big structure. There is thousands of people working in it. And what I see whenever I am in NATO meetings with NATO people is that it's a perfect cross-section of society. So you have all types of characters in it. You have a gender bias. It's obviously male dominance, that is there. Mm-hmm. There are women working at NATO, but not as many as could be. And maybe this is one of the circumstances that we need to work on and change, because maybe we need simply far more women working in NATO.
Yeah.
And so what we could say is that NATO is not homogeneous. It's not like the church where everybody is going to state exactly the same because there is a discipline telling people what they have to state. No, it's all normal people who have families and children, most of them, and they all have opinions, and they all live according to opinions. They have a job within NATO, but they can do the job either further towards peace or further towards it's a matter. So I would say that NATO is a perfect example of a large organization which has a typical cross-section of society. And maybe there is a little bit more aggression and less empathy within these people because they get chosen out of a certain pool of people. Yeah, there is also a lot of traditional military families, which means that the children get born on a military site, go to school on a military site, grow up there, etc., etc. So it's not like, it's a reality that's alien. There are military traditions, there are military lifestyles, and these lifestyles have an effect on biographies. So it could very well be, and this we will know for sure, for example, the day we have a epigenetic analysis of all NATO members. Yeah, let's say that we will get some blood samples of all NATO members. I don't know how many it is, maybe maybe we need 500,000 or 1 million blood samples, and we would know the average empathy capacity through this blood sampling.
Mm-hmm.
And this means that political decisions or the decisions within NATO depend on the people, so on what they decide to do, what they want to do, and they are not all the same, very simply.
You kind of remind me of what the Native Americans the Americans here, Americas, they used to say, I think they still say it, I don't know, I haven't lived on the reservation in quite a while, but they said that what they did traditionally in their tribes were to watch the children play. He says you can see who's the leader, who is the caretaker, who is the warrior. You can see their roles as they're playing as youth. And you take that child and you help that child to be the best at what they are naturally suited for.
Okay.
And I think this is where we lose it in the Western world, is we go by what did you study and what were grades in the day. And that's where we put it there instead of watching how did this child act when it was a youth? What was that role of the child, and develop that child from its youth? We just tend to go, just let them play, and when they get older, they'll decide what they want to do. I don't know. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that education in that sense needs to be newly thought, newly designed. I think that people like Sir Ken Robinson have done really a gorgeous work regarding how they focus on education and how education should be conceived and how it should work instead of what it does right now. So I think people like Sir Ken Robinson are extremely important to understand that we can change the patterns of behavior. And then what we need to see is that there is no free will as such if we decide that epigenetics are part of our existence. I mean, as long as we ignore epigenetics, it's easy to say, yes, we are free, but that's rubbish, okay? According to what I know from epigenetic science and coding, there have been, for example, there has been research done on cancer, and they have researched on couples of homozygotic twins, which means that these twin brothers, twin sisters have exactly the same gene code. It's identical. And then it happens that one of them has cancer and the other not. So, I mean, if we had free will and we had healthy genes, and these healthy genes are in both twins, then certainly both twins should stay alive and none of them should get cancer. But this is not reality. Reality is that we have twins who are exactly the same, they look like, they have exactly the same health, but one of them has cancer and the other not. So there is no such freedom, there is no such liberty. That's a utopia, yeah? And it's better if we deal with reality, and reality is that our body is made of cells, and these cells obey to natural and biological laws, and these biological laws include functioning epigenetics. So we need to take care of them. We have to, I would say, have a concept of the hygiene of epigenetics. It's like brushing your teeth. You have to take care of your epigenetics in the same way you take care of your teeth. If you brush your teeth 3 times a day, then you have to do something for your epigenetics, let's say at least 4 times a day.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if you understood, but what I was talking about with children, and I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, But it was just a point of watching a child as it grows up to find out what is its strengths, what is its interest, what is its natural interest. As now, you're a father, so I would assume that you would watch your children and see what they're really interested. What are they drawn to? And can you? I guess this is the question: is can you take that in our society, and can you take that observation from your child or children and help them to develop what they're natural. In other words, if a child loves to sit and draw all day, that's their thing. They could be a great artist. You understand that because you are an artist. Okay, or a kid that loves to read, especially what does he love to read? Does he like poetry? Does he like to write poetry? Does he think in poetic terms? Okay, or does one have, you can put kids out there and you put a bunch of toys, and do they gravitate to, going to the little toy soldiers, and are they always enacting war scenes and whatnot, and we're really not showing them any war movies or anything. So, where is their mentality as a child in watching them from that age and helping them to develop into if you want to say a useful useful human being. There's another word I'm using. I'll come up with it later.
Well, I would say, if we want a happy humanity, then we want a humanity that simply gets rid of all those factors that are determinant for their life in a way which makes them happy or unhappy. And obviously, I'm in favor of children who are allowed to grow according to their preferences and, according to what drives them. But again, this is why I was talking about epigenetics. If my child has had the bad luck that he's inherited some rape or sexual abuse stigma or some women battering stigma, then I have to deal with it. I can't just let it slip or let it happen. I'm not allowed to let my child be harmed by the inheritance. So, no, I would say clearly, Kirk, sorry, but that is a very, to look at, watch your child grow, and this is romantic in my understanding. It's romantic. It's a projection of a happiness that is idealized, and we want real happiness. So if we want real happiness, we have to deal with what stops us being happy. And any trauma coming down the line which will disturb the function of my genes is a danger, is a risk. And I just have to take care of it in a very normal fashion. I also, even if I want my child to be happy and do what it wants, and to just drive that child into loving life because this child feels that it can really take on exactly what it wants and be a happy person doing what it loves to do. I will take care that this child learns to brush his teeth 3 times a day.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should just set the kid out there and let him figure out what he wants to do and go do it. I'm talking about, okay, if he has this child, male or female, doesn't matter, if they have, say, a penchant for mechanics or engineering, what kind of engineering? Choose your form. Or they have a thing for medicine or psychology or whatever. Yes, we're still supposed to be guiding this child, but okay, that's where your interest is. Let's guide you in that way. Yes, we're still going to teach you how to brush your teeth. We're going to see that there is some sort of negativity in your personality, and we have to curb that. We have to teach you what is right, it's good. That is parents, what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just, okay, this child really loves flight, so all we're going to do is give them an airplane and we're going to send them off and let them do that. And we don't raise them. I'm not talking about, missing out on parenthood. I mean, talking about true parenthood, not just buying clothes and feeding them and giving them a place to live, but teaching the child something of great family values that's going to benefit not only them, but society as a whole.
Yeah, well, what I would say there, is important, and this is something that Sirkin Robinson points at, is that we have to raise our children as social entities. Our children are not alone. It's not their selfish and egocentric. It's not egocentrism that is relevant. It's not their personal strength. It's their personal strength within a context. Because this child grows up in a society and is depending on this society. And we have, so what we need to do, and Sirkin Robinson points at this very, very clearly, is that children can develop strategies to lead a happy life, a happy future, to become adults, and they can drive these strategies based on individual and on collective, so on social patterns. They are very able to play in both. And what I would say is that on one side, a child has to find out for himself, so on his own, and then we have to let the children decide as a group. So we have to make it possible that the children grow together and see for themselves what society wants and needs. Because a child always is born in a context of at least 2, if not 3, or even 4 generations. So the child is not alone. It's a child always with a history. And it's a child in a geopolitical context. And the child learns to operate with all the factors that bring him into life. Because a child gets born out of a situation. It's very different whether you are a child that is born in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is at war since 1976, or if you're a child born in Canada, let's say in Quebec, or in Ontario, or in Montreal, so it could be the city or the countryside, but Canada is one of the most peaceful countries on earth. The most peaceful, I read it this morning, this is why I'm knowing it, is, wait a minute, it's a very small country. I don't mind. It's, Denmark is a very happy country. Norway is a very happy country. So if you're born, New Zealand is one of these very happy countries. Iceland. So Iceland is the happiest country on planet Earth right now, according to sociological indicators. So if you're a child born in Iceland, you have completely different chances regarding happiness and achieving your own targets and goals than what you get in Afghanistan. But there are children born in both countries, in Iceland and in Afghanistan. And they are born in very different realities. And these children have to react based on the reality that they are born into.
We've gone a long way, and I actually think the conversation went well. But I think what we need to get back to is last week, for those who missed out on last week's shows, after our interview on last week's live show, Andreas and I got into a conversation about NATO and the U.S. And I'm going to paraphrase here, so I'm going to let Andreas correct me on wherever he needs to, which he sometimes does anyway. But that's okay. That's okay, fine. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But we were talking about after the show about how NATO is predominantly going towards peace and not wanting to war. And I made the comment, I said, it's kind of weird because it seems that NATO is going for peace, but the United States seems to be gearing up and pushing people and societies and nations to go to war. Andreas, well, actually, no. And I'm going to stop there and let you continue from there.
Yeah, I mean, also there we have to make a strong difference between resilient people, resilient US citizens who work for the peace side, and the non-resilient US citizens who work for the violent side. And the point is that we have critical masses of people in the US who have a lot of money, a lot of power, and they are not resilient, so they are working for the violent side, and they are there in sufficient numbers. So this is part of our reality. You know, we cannot live off wishful thinking. We have to look at what is there and see that if we have a population that is divided, and that the division within the population leads to having members of society who are violent and members of society who are peaceful, that it's an issue of knowing exactly how many of each kind we have. Let's say that we have a population in which trauma changes behaviors, and that in any given population on planet Earth, the proportion of violent behaviors towards peace behaviors will be in a sort of balance. So let's discuss a hypothesis. Let's discuss the hypothesis that within the US, 40 to 45% of US civil population is in fact willing to use violence and willing to use force because it's the way they are. It's the way their epigenetics are designed. Yeah, and this is easy to understand due to the amount of trauma that we are recording within the US. It's easy to understand due to the epigenetic inheritance coming from US ancestors, which were very often people from Europe or slaves, so people who have endured trauma for sure and who were thrown out of Europe, you know, either due to starvation, either due to religious conflicts. You know, and again, I would say religious conflicts to me a nonsense term. I don't see, you know, religious conflicts do not exist. It's just a label, religious conflict. But to me, there is violence and there is religion. And religion is completely opposed to violence. So to discuss religious conflicts is nonsense. But I'm just using the words right now because it's what people are used to listen to. Mm-hmm. So we have migration waves which go from Europe to the United States, and we know what it has meant for the indigenous population in the United States. We know how the Indio people were treated, the indigenous people, and we know what happened to them. We know where they are living right now and what they are allowed to do and what not. And so we see that a certain amount of violence is natural maybe to the US population. Why? Because nobody in the US has really decided to work on it in a strategic way. I do not see in the media that there are strategies to work against a real system of violence existing in the US. Sorry, there is nothing in the news. Mm-hmm. We have single initiatives, for example, Gary Slatkin, Dr. Slatkin is a fantastic doctor. He is an epidemiologist, so he has treated epidemics of malaria and cholera and things like these, and he's applied his knowledge, his medical knowledge, to violence and has treated violence like a disease. And in cities like Chicago, he managed to get the numbers of criminal action in the streets, so the criminal record in the city, down by 80%, which means that right now Chicago has only 20% of the crime rate that it had 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. But this is a single case. It's Gary Slatkin. It's not the entire United States. It's not the entire North American society. It could be. Mm-hmm. Which means there is hope. I mean, as we see that Gary Slatkin is right, that he's doing the right thing, the only thing we need to do is just say, okay, Gary Slatkin, could you please do it not just for Chicago, but for the entire United States? Yeah. And then Gary Slatkin will say, well, we need to have more Gary Slatkins because I'm not able to do it on my own. Yeah, but that's all. So if US American society decides that it wants less violence within its own society, it will be perfectly able to deal with it and drop numbers. That's for sure.
Let me ask you a question here to continue the discussion here. Now, the United States, I know you've been to the United States, I know you visited there, but I don't know what you know of its history, so let's just throw up some stuff. It's not a pretty history, but then again, who actually does have a very pristine history anyway? But the United States, without going through a long history, and I'm just going to summarize here very quickly, let's just go over the past 100, 150 years. There was slavery, there was even after slavery, there was in the South at least, they still lynched people, usually slave or ex-slaves at that point. And there are family members of those people that have either seen or some of their family hung. The Native Americans, the Indians as some people call them, they were into reservations. They were also forced to go to the mission schools, which was their trying to, or the at that point the conqueror's way of trying to get these people to leave their ancient ways so they could blend into the society. And in that process, I've known quite a few Native Americans who were telling me about their experiences in these mission schools, which ended up going into pedophilia and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then you have the Irish Jews, and there is always the battle between, and the Italians, that could not get jobs because in the United States they wanted you to be Protestant, and if you weren't Protestant, it was very difficult for anyone that was not Protestant to get jobs. So these people went out and created their own businesses, etc., etc. So within that mix, without getting any more details about it, how do you see that working out and working with genetics there?
Well, it's very simple. We have, the migration waves, which are really caused by poverty and by starvation and, by scarcity of resources in Europe. And we have this image, for example, of New York being the Big Apple as a symbol of hope, as a symbol of the promised land. And then people would go over there and hope for a better life. Mm-hmm. And so this alone would imply that maybe we had epigenetic damages in that population of 60% or 65%. Then by living in a prosperous surrounding, these people have been able to work, they had enough land to expand, they had a border inside their own country where they would just push the native populations away, and there would be a war zone, but this war zone would always be at the border, and the backyard would always be clean. So there you could have a progressive pacification, and you could have a steady development towards wealth and trauma-free zones. But these trauma-free zones develop in pockets. They do not develop as homogeneous circumstance or as homogeneous phenomenon that covers the entire country in equal proportions. So also within the US, you will have concentrations of population that is more or less damaged regarding epigenetics. So this means that you do not have a distribution of the problem that is even. It's very uneven. You may have concentrations within the city of New York, where you have parts of the city that are completely filthy with violence, and you have parts of the city which are already like New Zealand or Canada, very close to paradise circumstances. Mm-hmm. So this means that a real scientific approach needs to be taken on, and this is why I'm very much in favor of the method used by Gary Slutkin. It's one option. It's a very good option. I would say go ahead, do this or things that are similar. But please face the entire phenomenon. Do not face the phenomenon in a single pocket and do it well there and then think that because you've done it in one pocket it's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen in the entire country the same way because you have very strong differences. Mm-hmm. So you really need a methodological approach, and this means, for example, that you have to start a campaign that lasts at least 20 years. Mm-hmm. So we need a political mandate, we need a political decision, and we need the implementation of this political decision. Now, Kirk, I'm going to laugh a little bit because I'm talking about politicians, okay? Uh-huh. Oh no, Andrés, what are you stating? Andrés, what are you doing? I'm talking about politicians and discussing some issues that obviously politics do not even want to look into because violence allows for privilege. And those having the privilege are not going to simply allow others to get that privilege too. Mm-hmm. So violence is being used methodically. And this is why I say before any political process can start, and before we can talk about any solution like what we are doing, Kirk, it's far too early. We have to get a critical mass of the population informed. Whether politics want it or not, I don't care about what politicians want, because they do not want what I want. And this is where I say we are at war, and American society is at war because a portion of the American population wants peace and the other portion does not.
That's what got us into our conversation last week. So you're saying that, I'm going to use your words, they're playing a double game. So in one side, we see that they want war, and you're saying, but on the inside, they're working towards peace. So how does it work?
Well, it's very simple. It's not all of them. It's a part of them is working towards peace, and another part of them is working towards war. And as the United States is a very large country with a pretty large population, all sorts of pockets of violence and pockets of peace can coexist. Mm-hmm. It's only when they have a conflict between them that we notice the difference. But, there is enough space to keep them distant of each other. And politicians know very well where they have to find their own clients for their own purposes. And then you have a central government which is influenced by behaviors, by preferences, which in political terms are called lobbies. Yeah. But a lobby is a preference. It's a tendency. It's a behavior. Which again means, I am a complexity theory expert, and we call this in our own terms, in complexity language, we call this contingency.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And this means that what we need to do is we need to set up a different contingency. So we have to create a different group of people which are informed, and it's not going to be everybody. I'm not interested in informing the general public about what I discuss. It's good that we do it on this radio station because we know that people who are going to listen to this are mainly people who wish good, who wish well, who want to do something for the world and something for the planet. So we hope that most of the people listening to our show are empathic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is decisive. I do not want to discuss these issues with non-empathic people. It's dangerous. I would pass on knowledge to people which I do not want to be informed.
Mm-hmm. So, let me see. Before we move on to our last week, did you have anything else that you wanted to say? Oh, you wanted to talk about your meeting with the Minister of the Interior in Germany.
Exactly, which it's very easy. Now, there is a part of theoretical work that needs to be done, which is thinking, writing, discussing. And then there is a part of practical work which needs to be done. And this is what we discussed with the minister. The minister has approved that we start a pilot project with German police, which means that as we have already passed on our knowledge to groups of citizens within Germany, so we are creating pockets of peace, the state says, okay, we want to learn that too, please give us your knowledge. And let's do it with a pilot project with a whole group of police officers in Germany. And this means that we will balance the situation. I mean, we can't educate a civil population and not educate the people working in the state structures. This would create a very strong imbalance, and this imbalance would cause dynamics which we do not want to have. We do not want situations like revolutions. We want an evolution, a co-evolution. And if we want a co-evolution, we have to spread the knowledge within state structures, so the public domain and the private sector.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so tell us how this... okay, I know you just had that meeting just recently, but how do you see that coming into effect? I know you're saying that you've got pretty much a green light to go do it, so how do you see this coming about, and what are the hoped end results?
Okay, what is going to happen is this process will take on at least, I think, 3 to 5 years, because first of all, we want to design the program in which this educational pattern and setting will take place. Second, police officers have to be chosen who will be allowed to participate in this educational and training program. Third, we have to evaluate the results of the first setting and see what will happen further. And parallel to this, I will be teaching at university and working with regular students at university, which means that I will pass on the knowledge methodically to young people in Germany, age 20 to 28 or 30. And this means that we will have a strong evolution, because the pattern of communication of this knowledge will change with every lesson we give. It's like every time we have people who have the knowledge, this changes our setting. The more people we have informed, the more setting changes, and it changes rapidly. So we have to permanently adapt to the new circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Before we move to our last topic, I'd like you to, if you don't mind, review, in short, what we were talking about with NATO and the U.S. and as you said, there's a double game. In other words, those who want peace and what you're coming up against, and those who are for it, and how is that actually progressing, and how do you see what's going on between the two countries and their treaty? How do you see that working for our future?
At the moment, very badly. I must say that the options for a nuclear war are high, as they have been in the last years. Some military officers would like to play cards, pulling the joker out of their sleeves, and I am then one of these possible jokers, which means that I could be used for mediation between Russia and the United States. But my problem is that I do not see on either side that we have the intellectual capacity on both sides, US American and Russian side, to understand the problem, but I do not believe that there is sufficient people willing to work on the problem and setting up common goals. This is a process that takes time. I have been talking within NATO for 10 years, from 2005 down to 2015. And all these talks and discussions have allowed for a certain type of evolution. I started the talks with Russian members, official members of Russian society and government representatives, on the 15th December of 2013. And it sounds to me reasonable that I should be allowed to have these discussions for at least another 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I mean, if I have done some work in 10 years within the Western bloc of power, the Western Hemisphere, then, if we want to have an even discussion where chances are balanced, I can speed up the process, but speeding up is not necessarily going to allow for the message to sink in. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, we need time to discuss these issues on the eastern side as well. And, I can't be divided into two. It's not like you can clone me and use one Andrés Ginestet in the United States and one Andrés Ginestet in Russia. No, it's not like that. I just exist as one single person, and this is my problem. So I'm working day and night, and and I'm going zombie. So it may be that I'm used as a joker within the sleeve of some military officers, that they will call me, say, please make a miracle, and they'll say, maybe we look for a different joker, because I have no intention, in fact, to play hero, and I do not want to be in the focus. I think that I'm far more useful in the background and doing the work that I've been doing. But then, circumstances may pull this joker out, and then I may have to play the cards. Okay, I will try to do, and what I want is, I want time. Mm-hmm. I need time. I need time for conversation. I need time for passing on information and getting people to take it in.
Yes, that can be a slow process, as we both know.
Yes.
So, all right, let's go into our last topic. And if I remember what I wanted to say before, I will write it down so we don't forget it again. Anyhow, as we get into the last part, you had a conversation with a priest in the Catholic Church this past weekend. Now, that's all I know, so you're going to have to enlighten all of us, including me. What was that about?
It's a practical issue. It's like we are facing, the system of violence, not only as members of civil society, so as citizens, as members of a refuge we have founded. We obviously live in a community. And within community, so for example, we work with Syrian refugees, so all refugees that come from Syria and from Iraq, they come to our city, to the city of Wuppertal, and then we need to handle the situation. So we have people who are obviously traumatized, who have managed to flee their country and arrive in Germany, and now they are invited to become part of this society. And I must say that in the same way we explain issues on radio, I need to talk to the institutions that work with these refugees, like, in example, the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has a very important role because it organizes through several organizations how refugees will be spread over the city of Wuppertal, and how these families or single people coming will be treated within the community. And the church very often is the door opener, the gatekeeper. And for this reason, the gatekeeper has a strong interest in doing a job that is as good as possible. And here we have then very often conflicts, because the gatekeeper has a lot of experience, and because he has a lot of experience, the gatekeeper may think that he knows everything. And any new knowledge that is coming on top is just going to disrupt the process, and it's dangerous, and we don't want it, and so it's creating conflict because it means change. So on a very practical level, what we do is first obviously talk to the priests who are responsible to lead the projects of integration of refugees, and who are also responsible to deal with the challenge that it means to have traumatized people in a normal average population. The average trauma levels in Germany, we have an estimate that are about 20%. That's reasonable. We always say that the critical level is 30%. So when in any given population 30% of people have a trauma and have traumatic experience that affects everyday behavior through epigenetics. So if we have 30%, we reach a critical level where things can go violent. Mm-hmm. And as long as we are around about 10 or 20%, we're fine. 20% is already high. I'd rather have 10%. Yeah. But we do not have 10% in Germany, and we do not have 10% in Wuppertal. And every time somebody comes in that has a traumatic experience, we have to ask ourselves, okay, is this adding up? Can we build up sufficient resilience to help this to become a non-traumatic situation? Or are we going to slip into a traumatic situation? So what we are doing is, for example, informing the priests about epigenetics and how these epigenetics work. And to them, this is mainly as much a surprise as it is to the average citizen in any given society. So it puts them in a situation where they see huge amounts of possible change, and it creates in the first moment insecurity. It creates a dilemma. They do not know how to deal with it. And this is why we need private conversations, so that they come to us, they come home, and we can discuss these issues just at our table in a fully empathic surrounding, so that they will feel that they have our support and that we are also ready to help, facing situations and discussing with experts in the field and whatever. But it's not easy. And I wanted to explain this because this is a very practical day-to-day experience in which the normal average situation is created. We're not talking within an elite of people. We are talking with the very normal people in the street. And, I'm not just working NATO on these issues, I'm working on a very normal level. Even university for me, when I'm teaching at university, it's something special. Also there, I have a cross-section of students. So I have a cross-section of average society. But it's still specialized because it's all people which have one focus, have one interest. They are there because they want to learn. While the people who are working with, in example, refugees are people who have a long-standing experience and they are used to deal with the problem in their ways. So it's for them much harder to adapt and to learn something new than for students that come into university.
Yeah, I got me thinking about university, and I have a mental process that sometimes goes visual, so I was picturing everything that you were talking about the way you were saying it. So, sorry, I got a little lost in there just listening to you. Mm-hmm. I would assume also that it's going to be difficult for, matter of fact, any religious leader, because they've been looked upon as leaders for so long, and they're having now to look at something different and change. And change for a lot of people is not easy.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah. That's exactly the point, but we are now in a moment of change because complexity all over the planet is growing at a speed that is so high that either we learn to deal with the growth of complexity, or complexity is very simply going to drive us. And it is the other way around. If it's not us driving complexity, but complexity driving us, then we are going to really be beaten the shit out of us. I'm sorry to use these strong words, but this is really a very harsh and very violent circumstance. If it's complexity driving us, we have no chance. It's going to be very cruel, going to be very violent. It's going to be very painful and extremely traumatic.
Yeah, so basically we're left with choice. Which choice need or do which choice? Now we already know what we need. What choices do we choose?
Exactly. And the point is, it's not an issue of, having single people who are the leaders and are the cheerleaders and then, they push and pull whole blocks. No. Sorry. It's an issue of critical masses, which means that, for example, I have to discuss these issues every day with as many people as possible, in as many occasions as possible. Why? Because it's all about perception, understanding, taking in, translating, and operating.
Let's take a look at this from a different point of view, slightly different, but it's still the same thing. How do you see this working? Because I know what you're saying. What you're saying is everyone has to be involved in this, not just, as you're saying, leaders with their cheerleaders on the side going, rah, rah, go, team, go. But it's a thing where everybody has to get involved. And I'm going to use this as an example, such as Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a great leader, but after he died, it seems like so did his dream die. Because there weren't really anybody that would actually follow through. The few people that did follow through, they saw it as a way to earn money or to keep an influence, which was still not going in the direction Dr. King wanted it to go into. So how do you see all of this working, and how do you where everybody gets involved? Because as we all know, most people tend to be, and we use this very loosely, most people tend to be followers.
That's it here. And this is where I'm working on a different strategy. I do not work on a leader strategy. What we have done is we have cut the knowledge down into portions which are so small and are so easy to take that we can spread the knowledge to a very large portion of the population without needing anymore any leaders. And this is relevant. It's a totally different approach. I am not a charismatic leader. I could easily become one, but I'm not interested at all. Heroes are counterproductive. Heroes do not help. If we have stars, that's good for a movie, but it's not good if we want to change society. Change in society needs to be steady, progressive, and it needs to be done in such a way that it can be integrated into daily life patterns. And this means small changes at a time, small portions of knowledge taken in at a time, and not radical changes. And this is why our strategy is completely different of the strategy that was used by Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and other leaders. Also, I must say that in the end, these stars, these mega stars, pop stars, it's like Jesus Christ and The Life of Brian by Monty Python.
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's The Life of Brian and Monty Python is exactly that persiflage. Heroes are counterproductive. They stabilize the system. Why? Because they are the exception. And everybody can then point at that exception and say, yeah, but look, you have to be such a great person to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's nonsense. What we do is we say, no, everybody can do it. It's very simple, and it's something very pleasurable. If you do it, it's like buying yourself, your preferring, like, for example, a fresh orange juice. It's like drinking a fresh orange juice. You take it in, you have it inside, it makes you feel happy, and you can use it every day because, the vitamins in the orange juice are good for your health. Well, what we are giving you as portion of knowledge does the same on your brain level. It allows you to enhance your capacity of thought, and you can use it in your everyday life. So we have designed our instruction settings, and we have designed our learning patterns in a completely popular, down-to-earth, basic line. And we do absolutely not seek any kind of stars and vedettes. No, sorry. Leave that to Hollywood.
All right, let me ask you on that one little topic right there, because there are people that are competitive, and I mean competitive with other people. I like to be competitive with myself to find out the best I can be. That's what my competition is about. I don't care about, hey, can I be better than Andreas? I don't care. I don't know Andreas that well, do I want to compete with him? I just want to know what I can do. But for those people who are competitive, they want to be those stars. I want to be out front. I want people to see me. How do you deal with those people?
Well, put them in a film set.
Okay. That was so quick and easy.
It's very simple. Just put them in a film set, have a karaoke bar and give them a microphone and let them be. This is, we have culture, we have art. And culture and art enable for this to happen. If you have a karaoke bar, you can have people standing up from the public and singing the song, and showing off. And so we have to be professional in that too. Obviously, there is people who fancy narcissism. Okay, fine. Give them a scenario. Give them a place where they can do it. Just design it. And design the time frame for it. And design the setting, Have children coming in so that they see that they are doing it for children and adults, for example, So in Spain, we have a tradition which is flamenco. Mm-hmm. And flamenco is very much about that. Anybody can be a flamenco dancer, or in the past, it was a popular tradition, which meant that you would have people dancing flamenco, living flamenco in the streets. And it was not the rich people, it was the poor people. Mm-hmm. They just needed a guitar, a pair of shoes, a dress, and they could art flamenco any place, any time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is, for example, one nice picture, and there are beautiful films about it that you can watch on YouTube about flamenco and flamenco way of life, which show how this happens. In Catalonia, where I come from, we have different things. We train the children to become part of society by building human towers. These human towers build up 12 people standing on top of each other, on each other's shoulders. So you have, at the basis, you have 500 people who are standing in a circle, and they're all pulling towards the middle of the circle. And in the middle you have, let's say, 4 to 8 very strong men. And then you have the first row of strong men that climbs on the shoulders of these men, and then they build up the tower, and they go up to 12 stories, which means that you have 12 people standing on top of each other, on each other's shoulders. Mm-hmm. And the last person going up is always a 3-year-old child. This 3-year-old child is called the Ashaneta. And this child has to manage to climb up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stories. And when he's on the top of the pillar of people, he has to lift one arm and one leg and climb down the other side. This is called castellers. It's building castles. Yeah. And this is something that you start at a very early childhood. You have to start at age 1, age 2. Mm-hmm. So you have to, as soon as you're born, you have to participate in what is called the collas, las collas. And the children learn to become a casteller, which means that you learn to become part of a group that builds something that is really difficult to make. Hmm. And it's done just for the purpose of being part of a group who does it. And it's all genders, so it's very often a 3-year-old girl that climbs up to the top. And you have parents in Piña. La Piña is the group of 500 people, at least 500 people that are, standing each behind the other, arms in front of you, and you put your arms in the shoulder of the person which is standing in front of you, and you push that person towards the middle. Huh. And the grandparents, all the grandparents, so this goes through 3-4 generations, form part of the Piña. So they are there, and then the strong men or strong women will stand in the middle in the first, second, or third story, So this is a kind of tradition, which is a cultural tradition in which you can put all your narcissism. And Kirk, if you have done this once, it's like you know what it's like. It's a physical experience because these human towers, they crumble down. It quite often happens that they do not keep balance. And something happens and but nobody ever dies. It's like, you then have on the bottom, you have 500 people lifting 1,000 arms and holding those who are falling.
Yeah.
And nothing happens.
I like that. I'm picking it, and I like that idea. And yeah, it does go to community. It could do nothing less actually than build a community, because everybody has to rely on each other so that it actually happens and people don't get injured. Even though on occasion it does, I know, yeah.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is that the last one going to the top of the tower is a 3-year-old child, 3 to 4 years. It has to be small enough.
Yeah.
And this child will climb, imagine what it's like to have 12 people standing on top of each other's shoulders. So it's 12 times 1.5 meters. That's 18 meters height. You have and for a 3 or 4-year-old child, that's quite a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn to become a star, but you learn also what it means. How many you need 500 to 700 people participating in the process.
Yeah, definitely.
That requires organization because they have to meet to the training. They train all year. It's like if on holiday, they have to look for a replacement because the castle will be built anyway.
Yeah, still going to be built, but okay, we need somebody else to be here. But it's a community. We all have to depend upon each other. Can you summarize? Because I have one more question I want to ask, and then I guess we'll end our interview for today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that we have to use cultural traditions in which we can simply allow for the expression of competitiveness in a nice way, which is rewarding for the person doing it and the person looking at it. Like, for example, in a setting like flamenco, we can do it because there anybody can be el bailador, so the man dancing in front, and just go out and do it out of a feeling that he has, and look into the eyes of the musician who's playing the guitar and tell him, can you please play that? And then you start dancing accordingly. So there you allow for a personal behavior, you allow for a personal and very narcissist representation, but it's fine because it's in a setting and there is people around dancing with you, there is people looking at it, and that makes sense. So there you can express narcissism, and then you can create collective patterns of culture like Castellers in Catalonia, where you have groups of 500 to 700 people doing one job, and where the children learn to become, the ones climbing to the top of the tower, which is very important. It has a very strong symbolical value. And this is why I say it's a matter of culture. I'm not saying that the United States of America need Catalan teachers teaching them how to do castells, but why not?
Yeah.
Why not? One of the American traditions that could be compared to that is, for example, rodeo. So training horses but that's very special. And again, that's narcissism because, there is a group working, but still it's the horse rider. It's a single man or woman. And, it's not that much of a community, but, it could be compared to flamenco. Okay, you understand the effect of. So what we would have to is, for example, for the United States, look for cultural traditions that would allow for the expression of narcissism and competitiveness in a healthy pattern.
That one we're going to have to continue on with later on, as I know about flamenco because, when I used to live in the States, I used to chase down whenever I could find them, Flamenco, used to be Spanish restaurants that had flamenco dancers in there on occasion, and Jose Greco, when he was, I'm assuming he's passed by now, but he used to come to Chicago and whatnot. So I used to go to these things. So yeah, I understand that point, and I don't know. I've always been kind of drawn to flamenco, but I can't dance it. But whatever works out. But let's go to excuse me. One last thought here, because we were talking about this, and I was telling you that actually I'm doing a series of shows now, which I just did this week, entitled, as part one of cognitive dissonance. And how do you see cognitive dissonance playing in what you're actually we are trying to get done?
Well, cognitive dissonance, is something that also is based upon biological factors. You have a cognitive dissonance which comes along with, for example, epigenetic damage on chromosome 5. If you have a loss of empathy, you have a very strong cognitive dissonance. It's very simple. Yeah. So again, also here, we are talking, when we talk about cognitive dissonance, of the effects of something that we do not see or not understand yet. From the moment on, we will have 50% of any population on planet Earth diagnosed, and from the moment on, we have blood samples of that population and know how the epigenetics look like. Cognitive dissonance will be something completely different. Mm-hmm. So when we discuss cognitive dissonance, this is as far as we can go right now, because this is what we are trained to do and what we know. But there is going to be progress, and then cognitive dissonance will, fade. It will fade with time, because we are going to replace uncertainty by certainty through blood sampling and analysis. And once we've done this, we will act accordingly. So whenever we see we have a, let's say, problem in a sampling that we have of a certain region in any country given on planet Earth, we will interact with that region with strategies which will be there to cope with the situation. And this means that cognitive dissonance is something that we are looking at right now, because this is the symptom, the visible symptom of a reality that is beneath. But as we are tackling the reality beneath, we will solve this cognitive dissonance, and it will grow to a lesser problem.
Well, that's part of what I'm trying to get people to do, is just to see that, just because it goes against something that you're taught, or something that you believe in, or some knowledge that you have gained somewhere down the line, it needs to be, I shouldn't say it needs to be. You should take an open-minded look to see maybe that is right, or maybe that is wrong, but you won't know until you take a look. It's kind of like what we were talking about off air, when you were trying to give something to someone and they said, "Oh, don't give that to me. It might be true. It might be false. I don't know, but I don't want to know it."
Exactly. Yeah, that's a cognitive dissonance, a very clear one. It's a professional journalist who refuses to accept written proof. He has the document in front of him on a table, and he says, even if it's true, I don't want to believe it. Because first need to have my reset. Yeah, it's like I was discussing with him these issues about epigenetics precisely, and I was describing to him the German research that has been done at the University of the City of Constance in the south of Germany in the year 2011. And this was a research done upon and on behalf of battered women, and the research was focused on unveiling the epigenetic inheritance for the children of women who have endured domestic violence, battery. Mm-hmm. And it happens to be that the research is conclusive and it's really final. Any woman that has been beaten up passes on fear behaviors to the next generation.
Yeah.
So, it's like, for journalists, that was too much. Then afterwards, I also understood why, because I was not alone in the conversation, and the other person could then explain to me that the journalist had been a victim of domestic abuse, so battering. So it was difficult for that person to take in the message.
Yeah, I would love to ask you this question, but I'm not going to do it, at least not on air. I would love for you to come up with a politician and anyone that's well known, and just what do you see from what do you think about that person from what you see? But we'll do that maybe another time. We'll talk about it off air.
Mm-hmm.
But
Good.
anyhow, just to close out the show, is there anything else that you would like to share with us, or to, say, encourage the population to do?
Yes, I would like to encourage the population to become an active part in our next shows. I think that it's very important, people listening to this radio show have the chance, the opportunity to talk to me and to discuss issues live. Let's do it. Face reality. Let's discuss reality. It can be done in an anonymous way. If anybody knows a problem, for example, a problem that he has in the neighborhood or in his own family, let the conversation be in an anonymous setting. So come up. Do not tell us your real name. Tell us any name you want. Mm-hmm. Tell us, that you're living in any city you want. Don't tell us the real city. Don't tell us anything. If you want to mask your voice even, because if there is delicate things that you, or discuss issues in a completely, abstract setting, talk about it on a very theoretical level, or discuss your personal examples if you want and if you can in a personal way, but come up with your questions and let us discuss these issues, because it's the best way to progress and to manage to slowly take the knowledge in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and please stay tuned on the blog, not Blog Talk, but the K-Wave 6 radio website, which is K-Wave 6, the number 6, radio.tk, not .com, .tk, and you'll find out when Andrés will be on. We have Andrés and I will maybe doing more podcasts between now and May, but our next, it is, we spoke about it in our last interview, our next planned live show will be somewhere in early May. So stay tuned with us, find out what's going on. We'll let you know what's going on with this, and if Andrés has anything that he wants to share with us, I can put it on the blog and we can take it from there. So anyway, Andrés, thank you once again for being here. He's fast becoming my brother, so...
Well, I'm very happy to do this with you, Kirk. I think that it's very healthy. I must say, we don't need to even meet in person because we know we are discussing issues. We are doing it for the entire human species. We're doing it for all of us. We are doing it out of empathy. We're not doing it out of any cynicism and also not out of any arrogance. We're not doing it out of any narcissism. It's not like we do it because we think that it may be useful and helpful, and because we just hope that this will help make this world a happier place for our children. And it's great to be with you, and I'm very thankful for what you're doing and the work you're doing. I think it's very precious.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And as was even I'm not doing it for money. There's even you said it even in previous broadcasts. You do your work with NATO free. You don't get paid for doing that work. These podcasts and whatnot. So far, I'm not getting advertisers, so I'm still doing them, and I'm doing it for free because I feel that this show should be about all things that are positive. So,
Very good.
Anyhow, with that being said, thank you for being here. Thank you, audience, for being here as a listener. And if you ever want to contact us, just go to our website and go to our contact page, our website, our email address is there, and you can use the form that's built into the website. Again, it is kwave6radio.tk. And take care and be well and keep in touch. We'll see you soon. Thank you for being a part of our listening audience. Be sure to keep up with our shows and our podcast via our blog, on Twitter, and in Facebook. All links, including our RSS feed, are available at kwave6radio.tk. That's kwave6, the number 6, radio.tk. All the best.